we kind of grew up on Pokemon. Around here a lot of kids did. It worked out perfectly for us, too. Every time a new general came out, one of us would get one version, one of us would get the other, and since our mom liked to spoil us, we both got the third one. This is going to sound, at first, like a bittersweet story about two siblings who grow up with a couple of games that eventually take them down two different roads. Well, it's a little more than that. The years rolled by, we kept collecting. Game Boys got old, we replaced them. Cartridges finally gave out, we picked up new copies. But we started down two completely different roads before Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald came out. See, around then my brother got a Gameshark. We had heard all the hacks and cheats you could do with them, even if we were kind of late to the party, and they sounded awfully cool. Our first guinea pig cartridge was my brother's old blue version. We just dicked around with it a little bit, nothing major. But whatever we did fucked the cartridge up. After just a couple of code entries, it glitched out completely and became unplayable. Naturally we were upset at first. My brother mourned the loss of his hours of work, and I was sympathetic. I told him, it's okay, we can replace it I guess. Stupid shark was a waste of money. But here our paths finally differed. After seeing the mess it had turned blue version into, I had become opposed to the idea of hacking or cheating any of my games. What can I say? I'm a chick. I feel feelings for the little pixel critters. At least with that Gameshark. But my brother had taken his game's destruction as a personal challenge or something. I don't think he ever played a game after that which wasn't hacked somehow. Yeah, we played a shit ton of Pokemon, man. But for us there really wasn't much else to do. We lived way out in the country without many other kids, and the farmers didn't want us on their property, so we played Pokemon out on the lawn just about all day, every day. It was pretty awesome to us, at least. We lost the Gameshark when our rooms got moved around. A new addition was built onto our house and it disappeared in the mess of shit that got stuffed into the new closet. Ruby/Sapphire/Emerald arrived, and after playing through them once we were both in agreement that they were definitely lacking in comparison to the last general. We both tried another honest playthrough, and though we managed to finish, it left us both yearning for some good old-fashioned nostalgia. Where were our old gold, silver, and crystal cartridges though? It took us probably a month to dig through the boxes we'd been too lazy to open up before, but we finally found one full of a shitload of all our old electronics. My old purple Game Boy Color still worked, his red one could no longer hold batteries in place. Both of our DAWs were fine, though, along with our snack lights and link cables, that one with a nifty little connector in the middle that I had always wrapped up oh so carefully, to avoid fraying the wires and condemning it to the trash like our last cable. We both grabbed up everything we could. It was so nice to have Yellow, which had been my first and most cherished game of any series, not just Pokemon, and Red and Gold back. We went through the motions of checking our old files, taking in all the old memories, and eventually we figured the General 1 stuff was just too nostalgic to get rid of. I restarted Gold, he restarted Silver. Immediately he snatched the Gameshark out of the box and slipped it into the back of his GBA. I just shook my head at him. I remember what I said to him. That thing will kill your game, you know. He never had liked me preaching to him about abusing pixels. I shut my mouth after that, but it had put him off from playing with me. I guess it was just one time too many or something. I oughta know to keep my thoughts to myself. Really, it was a couple of days later that it happened. I was out on the porch, Game Boy in hand, just about to go into the Elite Four, when I realized I needed a little help. My team was ill-balanced thanks to my playing through for leisure, and at the time I was no great trainer that could pull off gimmick runs. I knew that my brother had been 2 badges ahead of me when we last checked with one another, so I was hoping maybe he'd let me borrow a Pokemon or two just for this run-through. Now, the thing is that I'd spent the last 24 hours at a friend's place. I had literally come home, dumped my bag in my room, and crept out into the sun with my GBA to play. I had no idea what he'd been up to. For all I knew, he was done with the game and onto a new one, which I figured was all the better for me since he wouldn't need those Pokemon and I'd stand a better chance of nicking a few. So I got up and went into the house, and when I was crossing the living room I noticed all of his Pokemon games lying on the floor. Some of the cartridges had been mangled, like they'd been hacked at with something sharp. Even his old blue version, long ago dead and too sentimental to throw away, was lying with a plastic cut ragged, split almost halfway up one side, completely unusable anymore, even if it would have worked. I was a little scared. This had to have happened this morning, otherwise our mom would have seen and they wouldn't be lying on the carpet. Tucking my GVA into my pocket, I crept over to his room and found the door unlocked. Somehow that was even more concerning. I walked in and found my brother sitting on the edge of his bed. His GVA was in pieces on the floor at his feet, smashed to bits. Next to him on the bed were a hammer and our mother's gardening scissors. His face was paler than I'd ever seen it, even whiter than the time we'd gone cloning and the old guy up the street, legally blind and a raving nutcase, had come and chased us into the trees with a shotgun. It was now I also noticed the mesher on the ground and a silver cartridge corner poking from under his bed. Somehow they had been spared the wrath of the hammer. "Are you okay?" I asked. I remember the chills that ran through me. He was my little brother. Seeing him like this was horrifying. It was awful. I remember him rasping, and the way his voice rattled made my knees weak. Oh God. White everywhere, and then the I remember running over and hugging him. And I remember his limp arm fell and brushed the Game Boy in my pocket, and his sudden scream right in my ear, making me jump and bite my tongue by accident. He ripped the handheld from my pocket and hurled it at the far wall. I cried out at the dent the plastic system made there, running over to collect it. The screen had gone dark, and though I feared the worst, when I flicked the switch it powered up normally. I waited there, in the corner, trying to pretend the GVA mattered enough not to go and run for our mom. The volume was on. The Pokemon theme started up, and he screamed again, picking up the hammer. This time I screamed, too, and ran from the room with my GVA clutched to my chest like a shield. He ended up in the psyche ward of the hospital for 2 days. When we went to visit him, I left my GVA at home. No one could figure out what had set off his strange, manic behavior. There was some talk that I didn't understand at the time about some kind of disorder he may or may not have had, but even though Mom and I had collected and brought in all the cut-up cartridges to be looked at, Mom's idea, not mine, no one had even thought to tie it back to the game. Maybe that was my fault. I hadn't said a word about what had happened when he had accidentally touched my Game Boy, or the blind, white terror he had been thrown into when the music had started. On my last visit to the hospital before school, on the second day, I was left alone in the room with him while Mom had some private talk with the doctor about precautions to take should this happen again. I sat in a chair next to the bed where he was staring at the ceiling. But then suddenly he sat up, making me flinch. "Hey," he told me, "Angie. Go in my room when you get home." I didn't understand what he meant, and then I remembered the things we hadn't packed up and brought in the game and the hacking tool under his bed. "Get rid of them. I don't ever want to play with them ever again." His voice was so weary and desperate he sounded like an old man on his deathbed. My poor, damaged little brother, how could I refuse? "Promise you'll get rid of them." "Okay. I promise." I was carted off to school late, and through the whole day I only had my promise to him in my head. I didn't know it at the time, but this would be the last time that I could ever play the big sister role and help him out. I just had to get home and get rid of that game, but as the day went on a sick curiosity started to go through my own head. What could possibly have happened to that game that scared him so badly? I was scared myself, but I just had to know. I had to. I got home and went right into his room, bent on uncovering whatever horror was waiting for me. Mom had since vacuumed the room, and the cartridge and the mesher were no longer visible. I got down and crawled half under the bed, feeling timid but holding on to the promise I made as my badge of courage. Under the bed there was enough dust to make me cough, enough old Legos and various other toys that I couldn't set my elbow down without it landing on something. But I finally saw both objects. They'd been shoved to the corner, on top of a notebook that looked too new to have been down here long. Unthinking, I grabbed the corner of the paper and dragged everything out with me, still wheezing from the dust. Allergies and all. They looked so innocent, simple toys and a simple, spiral-bound bunch of papers. When I set silver version and the mesher on the floor, I took a closer look at the notebook. On it were scrawled at least 20 different cheat codes, but one had been scratched out with Sharpie over where it had initially been drawn in with pen. This was confusing. He had tried to erase it out. The marker had been pressed to the paper so hard that ink soaked through most of the pages behind it, almost 2/3 of the way to the cardstock back cover. But pen has a way of sticking around. I picked up the notebook and tilted it backward in the light, and the reflective surface of the Sharpie revealed the indents that had been left where he'd written. The code was an unintelligible mess of letters and numbers, but the words next to it confused me. Easter egg snow on Mount Silver. I remembered what he had said when I'd found him. He had been raving about white and then black. Could he mean snow? Even though it was only August and the temperature was still climbing to 90 degrees every day, a chill ran down my spine. Did I dare? I picked everything up and brought it to my room and laid it out on the carpet in front of me with my own GBA next to it. For a long time I just stared down at it, and the longer I looked, the more maniacal Luja's face became on the sticker, like some kind of twisted grin, like it was daring me to find out what had happened to my brother. I was a 14-year-old kid. Did I really want to tempt fate and risk ending up like him? I glared down at Luja for a while longer. I had to see. I slid gold out of my GBA and stuck silver in its place. It took me almost 15 minutes to compose myself and turn it on. It started up normally. I left the sound on low, too afraid of what I might hear to keep it up the full way, and too curious to turn it the whole way off. The title screen was normal, too. Luja again, but somehow menacing despite my common sense, telling me it was exactly the same picture as every other time I had started up the game. How bad could this be? I asked myself. His notes said Easter egg. Didn't that mean that was coding already in the game? The menu came up still absolutely normal. His character was Blake, with a mostly filled Pokédex, but the time was odd. 9:99:99. He couldn't have been playing that long. I had barely logged 50 hours on my own game and I was at V4 and I was playing slowly. Probably the result of his hacking fucking up his file, I thought. Well, whatever. Then the game started up, and the first thing I noticed was the prolonged black screen. It took almost a minute for anything to change and there was no sound at all. The hairs on the back of my neck were standing up already, but it was too late to turn back. Finally, a very dim sort of map came onto the screen, but it looked like static. What was going on? I squinted down and realized with a fearsome pang that it was actually the Mount Silver map, but what I thought was static was heavy falling snow. So this was where he had last saved his game. I checked his party, a very normal team for someone who'd been using a Umeshurk, Typhlosion, Feraligatr, Meganium, Pidgeot, Tyranitar, Lugia, all level 100 with modded moves typical for him. Something about the sprites was strange, though. They seemed sullen in a way. Their colors seemed washed out, and their expressions lacked the usual vigor they normally had. I chalked this up to missing pixels or something, also due to the hacking. The map had brightened up just a smidgen when I closed out of the start menu. Indeed, snow was somehow falling very heavily. Pixels danced across the screen so fast it was hard to see the little sprite that was my brother's character. Something was off about him, too. When I checked the information, it was the same as the Pokémon sprites. The colors were dull. In fact, now that I thought about it, he almost looked frostbitten. My stomach tightened, and I turned and tried to move back down the mountain. As I hit the bottom of the screen, words popped up, and there was finally a sound, my sprite hitting an invisible wall. I can't turn back now. That was unsettling. I went into my Pokémon and tried to use Pidgeot's fly ability. I can't fly in this. Obviously referring to the snow. Fuck this, I thought, going into his bag. There was an escape rope. I tried using it. I can't go back anymore. What was going on? Once again, I tried to walk back down the mountain, and to my horror the words changed with every attempt. I can't run away. I can't go back down. I can never go back. This last one sent a frigid feeling through my heart. There was no way down the mountain. I had to climb. Turning the little sprite around, I moved him forward. No resistance at all, though my walking speed was oddly slow. What was truly weird was the lack of grass, of trainers, of anything at all but that white snow, which still blew across the screen and made it almost impossible to see. As I moved further up the mountain, his walking speed became slower and slower. The static curtain of pixels grew thicker, so that I could barely make out the features of the map, but it seemed like the only way to move was straight ahead anyway. I reached what looked like a set of stairs at the very top edge of the screen. I didn't remember this being there before. As I tried to move up, the little sprite paused. I'm cold. By now, even I was getting goosebumps. His walking speed had become painfully slow, as if somehow he was being impeded. Up the little staircase, more text on the screen. Meganium has died. What the fuck, I thought. Pokemon don't die in these games. I checked in my party and was frightened and confused by what I saw. Meganium's sprite had been replaced by a Red X. All of my other Pokemon sported varying degrees of damage, though I hadn't battled once. I went into my bag and found a single revive, and tried to use it. It's too late, it said. What kind of Easter egg was this? There wasn't much else I could do. Trying to turn around yielded the same messages as before, so I kept moving. Pigeon has died. I checked again. Sure enough, there was a little red X. This time I selected it and looked at the Pokemon itself, trying to figure out what was wrong. I wished I hadn't. The sprite was mangled, pieces of it were missing. What was left was splotched with a sickish blue-gray color, and its eye was a solid black pit. I flipped down to Meganium, same deal, a leg missing, a chunk of its neck, most of its head, save that pitch black, dead eye. Morbid curiosity urged me onward, and the path never deviated from the straight upward road I'd traveled the entire time. Along the way, every now and then, another party Pokemon would die. An examination of its sprite would show it was in the same condition as the others, until all that was left was Typhlosion. One more staircase was up ahead. I climbed it, braced for whatever horror awaited me. I hit the summit. It was deserted. Red was nowhere to be found. The snow had stopped falling. In the very center of the map was something sticking out of the snow. It looked like a Pokeball. Okay, maybe all this creepy shit lead up to some climactic final battle using whatever was in THERE. If I picked it up, maybe Red would come out of hiding. I walked over and examined it, and there was a burst of static noise from my game that made me jump. What appeared on the screen was a battle animation, my trainer sprite appearing, his skin tinged blue against another mangled Pokemon sprite. It was Celebi. In the center of that black hole that was its eye, a single red dot burned out like an ember. The thing looked rotted. I didn't even throw out my mostly dead Typhlosion before it had moved. Celebi used Perish Song. A screech came out of my GBA, and I almost dropped it as the screen went white. A part of me was relieved, thinking that my final Pokemon had been caught and I would be transported to a Pokemon Center, but I was wrong. My sprite reappeared in what looked like a cave. Was I now inside the mountain? I checked my trainer card and felt sick. The sprite was just as bald as the Pokemon had been, a leg down. A single eye remaining, pitch black and so sad looking. Tears welled up at the corner and every color on him was replaced by those 6 shades of frosty blue and gray. Every stat on the card was reduced to 0, except the time, which still read 9:99:99. I quickly moved back to the map. His sprite there mimicked the horror it had become on the trainer card. Pieces were missing, everything was discolored. I started trying to walk, and at first I received a message. It's so cold. There was only one direction to go, upward. I moved on, and every now and then would be stopped by a message that made my heart sink lower and lower. Mother, it feels so cold. I can't go on. The walls, as I walked, became darker and darker until they were pitch black at the end. There was an exit there, marked only by a white outline. I had no other choice but to go through it. It opened into a chamber that was also solid white. The only way to distinguish the walls was a thin gray line that marked them as separate from the floor. Against the far wall there was another sprite. Red sprite. Intact. I had come this far, I had to finish this. I walked right up to him and hit A. A battle started. Red sprite had none of the deformities that marred my own. The colors were the same blues and grays, but he was intact. He just looked extremely sad. His first Pokemon came out, Venusaur. It was just like my own, had been but level 0 with a speck of health. I sent out Explosion, who had just 6 hit points, HP, left. No Pokémon made a sound when they were brought into battle. Venusaur used Struggle. There was no animation, just a single point of damage, done to Typhlosion, and then the opposing sprite dropped off the screen. Venusaur has died. There was no text asking me to switch out. Instead, there was just what I took to be dialogue from Red. His next Pokémon was Blastoise, even more mangled than Venusaur had been. It too struggled and died. After each round there was that ominous from their trainer. Every sprite was more damaged than the last. His Estienne was barely distinguishable as a Pokémon. I realized somewhere he was sending them all out of order, which saved one Pokémon for last. Pikachu came out, and it was grotesque. It, too, was discolored like it was frostbitten. It was missing an ear, half its body and tail. Its head was mostly intact, but its eyes were much larger than they should have been, and glared out at me like pitch-black windows into hell. But the thing that got me the most was the giant smile that extended almost all the way to the edges of its head. Its health was somehow at 0, or at least looked that way. My hands were shaking. I didn't get a chance to attack. Pikachu used Pain Split. Pikachu has died. Typhlosion has died. It cut back to the image of Red Sprite, and now it looked like mine, with his body so butchered it looked like a carcass, stripped of most of its meat except it had those same, soulless, deranged eyes as Pikachu. I finally understood what happened. They were dead. They were dead, and this sub-level of the mountain was the hell they now existed in. Red finally spoke. It's over. The screen flashed black and white for a moment. Use Destiny Bond. A horrible, hideous screeching started to issue from my GBA. The screen went white and it shrieked at me, and I threw it to the floor and pressed my back against the bed. The horrible noise continued for several long moments, while the screen stayed white, then went black. Then there was silence. It took me a long few moments, but I eventually stood up. I took the Umeshirk. I took the notebook. I took that fucking possessed game. I picked them all up and carried them to the garbage, and we had already set out for morning pickup at the end of our long, winding driveway, and I threw them in. When I got back to the house, I don't know what made me do it, but I picked up yellow version and inserted it into my Game Boy. I think it was part of me determined to make sure I hadn't somehow been tainted as well. The music started up. The game played. I turned to my Pikachu and hit A. Its smiling face greeted me with an ear twitch and a big, pixelated smile. A pleasant, normal smile. I turned my game off and spent the next hour crying on the floor. My brother and I never did play Pokémon together again. He gave it up for good. I stuck to replaying my comforting, unhacked games. That winter, the snow fell thick.
Does anyone remember an old PC game from the early 1990s called Mr. Mix? It's mainly a typing game, similar to Mario Teaches Typing, where you have to type words into a box to make a chef, the titular Mr. Mix, put ingredients into a bowl. Unlike most typing games, however, this game is notorious for having an insane difficulty curve. The game has a words per minute requirement for each level, being as low as 10 on level 1 and as high as 85 on the third. By level 5, the requirement reaches over 500, effectively making it impossible to proceed any further. One of the main things that people noticed about this game immediately was the background music. The music on the first level was an unsettling pattern of growls that got progressively louder as the level went on, often causing damage to early computer speakers that were not designed to handle extremely high volumes of sound. The second level had no music at all, and the third had what sounded like an extremely low-quality recording of a hairdryer playing in the background. The remaining two levels had an extremely loud high-pitched ringing throughout the level that caused severe eardrum damage to those who managed to get that far. Another rather disturbing aspect of the game was the design of Mr. Mix himself. He was a large, round-faced, overweight man with large beady eyes and red spots on his cheeks. Most children who played the game reported having vivid nightmares of Mr. Mix speaking to them in a quiet, raspy voice and threatening them to keep quiet about something. However, none of them could remember exactly what that was. One psychologist, who saw many of these children, reported being disturbed by the sheer amount of terror on the faces of the children as they recounted the details of the nightmare. Many of the children broke down into tears in the process, begging for their parents to save them. However, no direct relationship to the game itself could be determined by these few cases, as not all children suffered the same adverse effects. For obvious reasons, this game did not sell very well. It remained in relative obscurity until a few years ago, when PC hackers got hold of a ROM of the game and started digging through it. Using memory hacking software, they managed to crack the game's code and bypass the impossible fifth level. What they found, however, was extremely disturbing and caused many of them to quit the expedition altogether. According to the reports these hackers left behind, the game behaves very strangely if the fifth level is bypassed. The game crashes violently and closes, writing a bunch of files to the user's System32 directory to the point that the RAM was almost completely filled. These files are reportedly pictures of people with horribly deformed faces appearing to scream in pain and agony, with their eyes appearing to be bleeding from their tear ducts and their outer layer of skin torn clean off in multiple places. If the user attempts to delete these files, the computer will violently crash and lose screen, causing permanent irreparable damage to the user's hard drive. The hackers found that this was caused by a lone light in the game's ROM that triggered when the fifth level was completed. After removing this light, they were able to proceed to the sixth and final level. Unfortunately, all of the original hackers declined to discuss what they saw in the final level. All of them became extremely paranoid and reclusive, refusing to talk about anything related to the game and showing astonishingly extreme symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. Most of them ceased to be able to form coherent sentences within a week, and, within a month, all of them went missing. All remaining copies of the game were destroyed. To this day, no one knows what was in that game that caused them so much psychological damage. Maybe it's better that way. 2 years after this incident, a man was arrested after trying to kidnap an 8-year-old girl from a grocery store. Through DNA and fingerprint analysis, the man was identified as one of the original hackers who viewed the final level of the game. He was wearing a white chef's hat and had a look of unspeakable malice and insanity on his face. When interrogated, the man would only say one thing: "I'm Mr. Mix. SHHH.
Some people might recall some momentary buzz caused a couple of years ago by a particularly odd Morrowind mod. The file name was jvk1166z.esp. It was never posted on any of the larger Elder Scrolls communities, usually just smaller boards and role-playing groups. I know in a few cases, rather than being posted, it was sent via PM or email to a chosen few. It was only up for a few days, to the best of my knowledge. It caused a buzz because it was a virus, or seemed to be. If you tried to load the game with a mod active, it would hang at the initial load screen for a full hour and then crash to the desktop. If you let it get that far, your install of Morrowind, along with any save files you had, would become completely corrupted. Nobody could figure out what the mod was trying to do, since it couldn't be opened in the construction set. Eventually, warnings were distributed not to use it if you found it, and things died down. About a year later, in a mod board I used to frequent, someone popped up with a mod again. He said he was made by a lurker who deleted his account immediately after sending. He also said that the person advised him to try playing the mod through DOSBox. For some reason, this worked. Sort of. The game was a bit laggy, and you couldn't get into options, load game, the console, or really anything else other than the game itself. The quick save and quick load hot buttons worked, but that was it. And the quick save file seemed to be just part of the game file, so you couldn't get at it anymore. Some speculated that the changed game used an older graphics renderer, making DOSBox necessary, but it didn't look any different. This part I can speak about from personal experience. When you start a new game in JVK, as the board came to call it, once you left the starting bit in the census office and came into the game proper, the first thing you notice is that the prophecy has been severed box pops up. This is because every single NPC having to do with the main quest is dead, with the sole exception of Yagram Bagern, the last of the Dreamer. Their corpses never despawn, so you can go check on all of them. In effect, you begin in a world that is doomed to start with. The second thing you notice is that you're losing health. It's only a bit, but it keeps happening a little bit at a time. The longer you stay in one place, the quicker it seems to occur. If you let this health loss kill you, you'll find the cause, a figure we came to call the Assassin, because he seems to wear a retextured version of the Dark Brotherhood armor from Tribunal, even though the expansions don't work in JVK. It's all black, completely untextured, like he's just a hole in space. The way he moves. He gave me quite a start the first time I saw him scuttling around my dead body. He crawls inhumanly on his hands and feet, his arms and legs splayed out like a spider. You'd usually only see him after death, crawling around and over your body just before the reload box popped up. Occasionally, you could catch a glimpse of him darting around a corner or crawling on a wall or ceiling. It made the game very difficult to play at night. Other than that, the only noticeable difference is that at night, at random intervals, every NPC in the game will go outside for a few minutes. During this time, the only thing they will say when hailed is, "Watch the sky." Once they return to their normal behavior, they act like normal, though. After a while, a player on the board discovered a new NPC named Tieras, a male gunmer in the temple at Ghostgate. Two things are notable about this NPC. First is his robe, a unique article of clothing that was lovingly rendered with twinkling stars all across it, looking like a torn-off chunk of the night sky. The second is that all of his dialogue, in addition to showing up in the dialogue box, is voiced. You can skip it if you wish, but it all sounds like it's in the default male gunmer voice. Some people said that they thought the voice was slightly different, but it was a very, very good imitation. I won't go into the details, but the questline he sends you on has to do with a dungeon, referred to simply as the Citadel. Up until this point, the quests were all of a fairly generic, discover the secrets of the ancient spent. The entrance to this dungeon is on a small island far to the west of Morrowind proper. I eventually discovered that if you use the scroll of Icarian flight at the westernmost point on the main landmass and jump directly west, you'd end up almost exactly at the island. Even though the dungeon is called the Citadel, it goes straight down. It dwarfs any other dungeon, both in size and difficulty. From a natural cave area you'll proceed down into an ancestral tomb-looking area, then a Daedric rune area, and then a Dwemer rune area. I made it down to the Dwemer runes before I quit. The creatures here were strong enough that a level 20 character would have to take care, and since you can't use the console in JVK, level 20 took a while to get to. Since quicksave and quickload are your only options, it's all too easy to get yourself into an impossible situation too. I did, and I just didn't have the energy to start over. Now what I'm telling you is based on what those few who went further reported. Past the Dwemer runes you find yourself in a level like the Dwemer runes, but darker. Rather than the usual bronze, all the surfaces, including those of the creatures, are black. The sounds of machinery are loud here, and grow louder still, randomly. There's also steam or fog everywhere, limiting your vision to about 10 in-game feet or so. If you can make it through all this, you will reach a hall that those who found it called it the portrait room. Like the fire in torches or other effects from early 3D games, this room has picture frames that always face directly at you, no matter how you look at them. The images in the frames were always randomly chosen images from your My Pictures folder. On the board, the ones who got there had some fun posting screenshots of the portrait room with various pictures in the frames, usually porn, of course. At the end of the hall was a locked door. After admitting defeat and returning to Tieras, everyone just found him saying, "Watch the sky," in his gravelly voice. What's more, nobody else in the game would say NYTHING. There was just a completely blank dialogue box, with no options at all. They wouldn't even rattle off the usual, canned audible greetings. The only exception was at night. Whenever they'd go out for a few minutes, they'd still repeat it. Watch the sky. At this point, one of the players, a friend of mine from the board, noticed, and the few others who got this far agreed that the night sky was no longer the usual night sky of Tamriel. It had changed to a depiction of a real night sky. And it moved. From this point on, everything is based on what this one person reported. Eventually, he got himself kicked from the board, but I kept in contact with him for as long as he responded. According to him, based on the constellations and planets, the sky started around February 2005. If you died, loaded, or went back into the Citadel, it would start over. When the usual day sky graphics took over, the movement would be suspended until the stars appeared again. In the space of a single night, everything would move about 2 months' worth. Since the timescale of JVK was more or less that of the standard game, that meant that a bit less than an hour was equal to a 24-hour period. He became convinced that the door would open based on some kind of celestial event. Of course, waiting for that meant leaving the game running. Of course, THAT meant that the game couldn't be left unattended thanks to our old friend, the assassin. My friend decided he'd hang out for a whole day, just to see if anything happened. That would be about a year's worth of movement. Here's the post he made at the end of this experiment. I loaded inside a meme where it all starts. It wasn't too bad, just had to check in now and then to move around and heal to make sure I wasn't dying. But check it out. 24 hours exactly in, and the assassin learned a new trick. HESCREAMS. I was reading and all of a sudden, this crazy loud shriek just about makes me crap myself. It's like something out of a horror movie. I look up, and there he is, just crouched down right in front of me. Of course, the second I moved my character, he ran off. When I went back down to the portrait room, the door was still locked. Damn it, damn it, damn it. A bit later, he came to the decision that he needed to wait 3 days, 3 years. The PM advising us to try DOSBox showed up in February of 2008, was his reasoning, anyway. After the first shriek, the assassin stops hitting you out of nowhere. Now he'll shriek, and if you don't move, for a few seconds after that he hits you. I think whoever made the mod was trying to help. At night, I've got my headphones on, and I was just kind of dozing off. When he wakes me up with a shriek, I jiggle the mouse, and I'm good. That post was 2 days in from his laptop. Once it was over. FUCK. So FUCKING done. So I wait the 3 days, right, and right after the FUCKING assassin made me jiggle the mouse, he shrieks again. So I look, and everyone in town is outside. They're all saying, watch the sky. I don't see anything, though. But then the game starts getting dark. Like REALLY dark. I turn up the brightness all the way on my monitor, and I can still barely see. I can see other people in the game, little figures running around in the distance, just running back and forth. If I try to get close, they run off. Now, I was trying to sleep, so the lights are off, and this is kind of creepy. I don't want to get up to turn on my light, because I don't want to miss anything, but NOTHING fucking happens. Eventually I go back to the Citadel. It's still dark, and I gotta swim, and the whole time I can see all these guys swimming all around me, just barely there. I make it to the Citadel, and it's normal light inside, and I get worried. Sure enough, the portrait door is STILLFUCKINGCLOSED. I go outside and it's ALLSTARTINGOVER. So that's it. I'm fucking going to bed, and I'm fucking done. The end. After that, 2 things happen. First, another of the people who got to the portrait room claimed that the assassin was showing up in his regular Morrowind game. Quick explanation. If you reinstalled Morrowind to a different folder, you could have a normal Morrowind install along with JVK. He himself chalked it up to an overactive imagination at first, but he reported a couple of really big scares, with a black figure crawling right at him, or seeing it waiting for him just around a corner before scuttling off. Another of those who reached the portrait room started a regular Morrowind game, but never saw him for sure. It was just a couple of babies, late at night, and always at a distance. The second is that my friend started getting really abusive and short-tempered on the board, though he stopped talking about JVK entirely. It got so bad that he was soon kicked off. I didn't hear anything from him for a couple of weeks after that, so I sent him an email. This was part of his reply. I know I shouldn't, but with classes out I've got some time, so I started JVK up again. It's almost 2011. And I think I've got the sleep madness. What stuff is happening? it's still dark. Once it gets dark, it never gets any lighter. It stays like that. The people moved a few months ago. Everyone in Satanim just went to that little bandit cave and moved in. They killed the bandits inside, and now they're just standing around inside. They don't say anything anymore. They don't do anything when you click on them. I quicksoved and killed one, and he just stood there until he died without fighting back. And it's like that everywhere. You have to walk, since the quick travel people are all in caves now, too. But all the cities and towns are just deserted. All the people are in caves and tombs. Everyone in Vivek is down in the sewers. I'm going to Ghost Gate next. I want to see if Kairos is still there. I'll tell you what he says when I get there. I replied and said I wanted to see what he said too, and waited a day. When I didn't get a reply, I mailed him again, and a couple of hours later he sent back, "Sorry, I totally forgot." So it's 2014 now. Since it's always night, the stars are always moving. The whole screen is dark, but you can still see the brightest stars moving around. Kairos was gone. Everyone in Ghost Gate was gone. I don't know where they went. They're not in any of the nearby caves. But there's new stuff. People still don't say anything, but their eyes are bleeding. It's so dark that even with a light spell you have to get right up against them to see. But there they are, little dark streaks, coming down from their eyes. I think I gotta be getting close. I know this is stupid, and there's no way the payoff is going to be worth it, but I just want to be able to say I stuck it out. I got that one during the day. Later that night, I got a follow-up email. Some of the planets aren't moving right. It's pissing me off. If this keeps up, I won't be able to keep track anymore. It's almost 2015 now, I think. Fuck. You know, I just now noticed that there aren't any monsters anymore, either. I'm completely alone outside now. The main quest people's bodies are still lying around, though. I went to check on them. I don't need headphones anymore, so I just leave them off. When he shrieks, it's like he's screaming right into my ear. I think I even kind of anticipate it. He's around a lot more now, a lot closer. He's different from the other people who started showing up, remember? They keep running around, just where I can barely see them. I have to admit, it's kind of creepy at night. Sometimes, when I go to the bathroom or whatever, I swear I can see something out of the corner of my eye. I'm keeping all the lights on now. I sent him a letter, jokingly telling him to get some real sleep, and left it at that. 2 mornings later, I found this in my email. It was the last thing I got from him. After this, he stopped responding completely. I just got up from a fucked up dream, I think. The assassin shrieked at me, and when I opened my eyes, he was right there, crouching over me. His arms and legs were longer, more like a spider's. I tried to push him away, but when I touched him my hands just went inside and I couldn't get them loose again, like he was made of tar or something. Then I woke up, I thought. He was gone, but when I looked at the monitor I wasn't where I was. I was in the corporarium with Yagram. For once, the light was okay, and I could see him all loaded on those mechanical spider legs. I sat down at the computer and he started talking to me. Not in a box, but really talking to me in Tyra's voice. He knew things about me. He told me things that I never told anyone, some things I totally forgot about. He told me that almost nobody had made it this far, and that the door would open up soon. I just had to hang on a little while longer. He said I'd know when it was time. He said I might be the first one to see what was inside. And then I woke up for real, but I was at the computer. I still wasn't where I was. I'm swimming out to the Citadel Island, and I can hear this tapping. It's at my window. It's over on the left, so I'm sending you this, because I left my laptop by my bed to the right. Just a little asterisk tap 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 asterisk. Like he's knocking his finger against the glass. I might still be dreaming now. So, I guess that's the end of the story. I know there's a few other stories floating around about the mod, but this is the only I know as true, as far as it goes. I deleted my JVK copy of the game pretty much right after I gave up, but I'd like to get the mod again, if anyone still has a copy of the file. I'd like to see some of this for myself.
Being honest here, I really enjoy having to do these types of stories. It's just, I wasn't sure how to give consent and where I would go with it, it per se, because of how much of a stumbler I am. And yeah, if I do end up screwing up on some words or end up stumbling on my fucking voice or I stop at certain points, I am indeed sorry. And I kind of find it funny too because I already wanted to do something to this equivalent and for some time now because of, say, Mudahar from some already gamers, Mr. Creepypasta, King Spook, the Shadow Reader, or Sainsguard with text to speech, and Creepypasta Jr. and Creeps McPasta with certain stories, and yeah. Plus, I also wanted to do my own intro and outro video. It was along with other things aside from having to use Windows Live Movie Maker. Or so I went with Canva for the intro and outro video that I did here, and also alongside with the segments where the stories are being read, or at least what stories are being read. That, and I also kind of wanted to do some other or specific shit, like trying to figure out how to blend in music with the fucking voices, so I wouldn't sound terribly silent. So, along with the text to speech, so I had to improvise something in here. And yeah, that's it, really. And to anyone who made these stories that I narrate, if you wanted to get these removed and because I didn't ask consent, and you didn't give me the consent, if you wanted to, I can go ahead and do that for you. So yeah, this has been Harold Ray Baker, signing out.